Your approach is too old school for where we're heading, she said flatly when she fired me. We need leadership that puts digital first. The name's Evan Carter. For 13 years, I led the Midwest sales division at Dunham and Ellis Publishing out of Indianapolis. I built that branch from the ground up, took a struggling region, and turned it into the company's #1 revenue driver. No fancy software. No slick algorithms. Just a lot of handshakes, real conversations, and knowing exactly which publishers needed what. By the time last year rolled around, my division was responsible for 55% of the company's total revenue. Of course, the higher-ups barely seemed to notice until the quarterly numbers hit their desks. Then came Samantha Doyle, the new CEO. She swept in 8 months ago with flashy PowerPoint decks and consultants dressed like they walked off a runway. Suddenly, every meeting was about disrupting the publishing model and embracing digital transformation. Samantha had never spent a day in publishing before. Her background was tech, some startup in San Francisco. But the board ate up everything she pitched. Me? I kept my head down and kept hitting my numbers. But it was impossible to ignore the way she kept watching me across the boardroom table. I was the oldest director left. The only one still scribbling in a leather planner, still getting on planes to meet clients face-to-face instead of firing up Zoom. Then, on a Monday morning, it happened. Her assistant Tyler came to my door, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. She wants to meet with you at 2, he said quietly, shifting from foot to foot. Executive boardroom. I thanked him and went right back to my call with Coleman Press, our biggest client. We were ironing out the final details on a 4-year deal worth $10 million. Deals like that didn't come from email blasts. They came from 9 years of quarterly dinners and honest-to-God relationships. The boardroom didn't even look the same anymore. Since Samantha took over, it was all glass walls, stark white furniture, and a massive digital screen where the old oak table used to stand. Waiting inside were Samantha, Tyler, and a woman from HR I'd never laid eyes on. I knew what was coming before she even opened her mouth. Evan, thank you for everything you've done for Oak and Light, she began, hands folded neatly on the table. But we're heading in a different direction with leadership. I sat there listening as she dressed up the real message that my ways were too old, that they needed someone who understood TikTok and CRM pipelines, though she never dared say the word younger. I shook her hand, thanked her for the opportunity, and left the room without making a scene. 13 years packed neatly into 15 minutes. What Samantha didn't understand, what none of them seemed to, was that real publishing, especially with the old, legacy houses that made up 80% of our business, didn't run on algorithms. It ran on trust. The kind you can't build through a screen. I cleared out my office while the team was off at lunch. No speeches. No goodbyes. Just quiet dignity. But when I slid into my car, the weight of it hit me. I sat there for a long time, staring down at my phone. 3 missed calls from Andrew Cole. He already knew. Back when I first started at Oak and Light, though back then it was still called Midwestern Literary Partners, we were barely 20 employees trying to stay afloat. I had walked away from Summit Literary Group after they got swallowed up by a big New York conglomerate. Left behind a corner office and a 6-figure paycheck because I couldn't stomach what corporate publishing was doing to real stories. Richard Dunham himself had hired me. We don't need number crunchers, he'd said, shaking my hand. We need people who still care about what's between the covers. For 5 straight years, I put 70,000 miles on my car. I hit every independent publisher from Ohio to Nebraska. I knew their kids' names. Showed up for weddings. Cried at funerals. Not because it was part of some strategy, but because that's just who we were. By the time Richard retired and his son Matthew stepped in, the division had grown 350%. Matthew was more into the numbers than his father ever was, but he got it. He left me alone to do what I did best. For years ago, when the board started whispering about bringing in modern leadership, Matthew fought tooth and nail to keep things the way they were. But last year, cancer took him, just 57 years old, and with him went the last real shield we had. Even before Samantha's arrival, the cracks had started to show. Board meetings were full of buzzwords like antiquated and outdated strategies. They questioned why we weren't flooding social media, why we hadn't optimized every touchpoint with fancy CRM tools. I started noticing other changes too. Dylan, my assistant director, the one I'd been grooming for years, began getting invites to meetings I wasn't even told about. He looked miserable delivering the updates. They're talking about splitting the sales team, he said. Digital versus traditional. I should have seen the writing on the wall. I should have known when they shoved 3 new digital engagement specialists onto my team without so much as a courtesy email. Or when they started pulling my legacy clients away, reassigning them to kids who had never even set foot in a publisher's office. Andrew Cole had called me furious when they tried to replace me on his account. Some kid rang me today, Andrew grumbled. Claimed he's my new point of contact. Said something about streamlining interfaces, whatever that means. Evan, what the hell is happening over there? Just some restructuring, I told him, lying through my teeth. Nothing you need to worry about. But deep down I was worried. Problem was, I didn't know how to fight a battle when I couldn't even recognize the weapons. The morning after they cut me loose, I sat in my home office, staring at my phone. 15 missed calls. 28 texts. 5 emails marked urgent. All from clients. All from old friends in the industry. I hadn't told a soul yet. Not even my wife, Laura, who was visiting our daughter in Columbus. I needed time to figure out how to even put it into words. The call that finally forced me to pick up came from Andrew Cole. And what he said next would change everything. What the hell's going on over there? Andrew barked the second I picked up. No hello, no warm-up. They're just heading in a new direction, I answered, sticking to the corporate script. That's crap, he snapped back. You are that company to most of us. Don't they get that? I didn't bother trying to defend it. What could I even say? I met with that new guy yesterday, Andrew went on, voice tight with frustration. Some kid named Logan or something. Spent 40 minutes rambling about analytics and engagement rates. He paused, letting the silence underline the real problem. Not once, he said, did he even ask about our new historical fiction imprint. You know, the one I told you could make or break us this year. I closed my eyes, feeling a deep, bone-tired exhaustion that had nothing to do with how much sleep I'd gotten. They'll figure it out, Andrew, I muttered, even though I knew they wouldn't. No, they won't, he shot back. Because people like that never bother to listen. They don't learn what matters. They just slap their systems on everything and expect it to work. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and pulled up the severance email HR had sent me. 4 months salary. Health insurance for 60 days. A standard non-disparagement agreement. And, of course, a non-compete clause, one that said I couldn't work with any of our clients for a full year. I actually chuckled when I read it. They really thought a piece of paper could erase decades of loyalty and relationships. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Charlotte Miles from Meadowstone Press, another client I'd built a genuine friendship with over the years. I heard what happened, she said when I answered. Their loss, not yours. When you're ready to talk about next steps, give me a call. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees that evening, I had heard from 10 major clients, the kind that made up almost half of Dummum's annual revenue. And they weren't just offering sympathy. They were reminding me that their loyalty wasn't to the logo on the building, it was to me. I sat on my back porch with a glass of bourbon, mulling over an idea that had quietly taken root that morning and had only grown louder with each conversation. Maybe the problem wasn't that I was outdated. Maybe the real value was the very thing Samantha and her consultants had dismissed. Relationships. Trust. Face-to-face handshakes instead of automated follow-ups. I pulled out my phone and dialed Nathan Reed, my attorney. Ben, I need you to look over something for me, I said. A non-compete clause. You're kidding, he said, immediately picking up on the tone in my voice. They let you go? They did, I confirmed, and I'm starting to think it might be the best damn thing that's ever happened to me. It wasn't about revenge. I didn't want to burn the place down. I just wanted to keep doing what I loved, helping publishers connect with the right readers and partners. And if Dummum didn't value that anymore, maybe it was time I found or built a place that did. That night, for the first time since that brutal Monday meeting, I slept straight through till morning. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Nathan at his downtown office as he slid a document across the desk. The good news, he said with a smile, is that this non-compete, it's basically worthless. I blinked. Seriously. Dead serious, he said. They overreached. Scope's too broad, time frames too long, and more importantly, they can't stop you from using the skills and knowledge you've built over your career. So, I could start my own consulting firm. I asked, trying not to get ahead of myself. You could, Nathan nodded. But there's a catch. Of course there is, I said dryly. They'll still try to sue you, he warned. Even if their case is weak, they've got the money to drag it out and make your life miserable. I leaned back, weighing my options. Dummum had the resources to fight dirty, no question. What if I said slowly, I don't chase any of their clients? What if I just made myself available? Nathan's grin said it all. Now you're thinking smart. The very next day, I filed the paperwork for Carter Publishing Consultants. No website, no glossy brochures, no big announcements. Just a simple legal entity ready to quietly pick up the pieces. 3 days later, my phone lit up with Andrew Cole's number. I hear you've set up shop, he said, getting right to the point. Word travels fast, I said, laughing. In this business? It spreads like wildfire, he replied. Listen, I need help with our winter catalog. Dunham's new team is trying to shove us toward academic markets, but my gut says we should double down on our historical series. I'm still figuring out what my next move is, I said cautiously. 15 grand for 2 months, he countered without missing a beat. Just consulting. No direct competition with Dunham. Just helping us make smarter decisions. It was a generous offer, and he'd structured it carefully to avoid any legal landmines. Still, I hesitated. Nothing about this path would be easy. Let me think about it, I said. Don't think too long, Andrew warned. We've got decisions to make next week. After I hung up, another unexpected call came through. Dylan, my old assistant director. Can we meet? He asked, keeping his voice low. Someplace quiet. Not at the office. We agreed on a small coffee shop out by Eagle Creek Park, safely away from downtown and the publishing scene. Dylan showed up looking like he expected to be followed, constantly glancing over his shoulder. It's bad, he said once we found a corner table. They promoted me to your job, but I'm just a figurehead. All the real decisions? They're coming straight from the new digital team. I'm not surprised, I said, but Dylan shook his head urgently. No, he said. You don't understand. And from the look in his eyes, I could tell the worst was yet to come. They were tearing apart everything I had built, piece by piece. My biggest accounts? Handed off to the digital team without so much as a conversation. They were rolling out a mandatory CRM system too, one that the older sales reps could barely figure out, let alone actually use. Already, 3 people had thrown in the towel. I took a slow sip of my coffee, keeping my face blank. What about the clients? I asked. Dylan darted his eyes around the cafe before leaning in closer. They're livid, he whispered. Riverstone's threatening to pull out. And Andrew Cole? I pressed. Dylan shook his head grimly. Hasn't returned a call in over a week? And the quarterly numbers? A disaster. He hesitated, his mouth tightening. Samantha's blaming it all on the transition, he added. Said it was just expected turbulence. But I could tell he wasn't done. He leaned in even closer. They're keeping tabs on you. Legal had a meeting about your non-compete yesterday. They're worried you'll take clients with you. That's when it all clicked. Dylan wasn't just nervous, he was risking his job just by sitting here with me. Thanks for the heads up, I told him quietly. He gave me a quick nod and slid an envelope across the table like we were part of some spy movie. Client contact list. Freshly updated. Personal emails. Private numbers. Then he stood up to leave, tossing over his shoulder, you didn't get this from me. And we never met. After he left, I just sat there, turning the envelope over in my hands. Taking even one name off that list would be exactly what Dunham wanted me to do. They were baiting me. If I took the bait, it would give them every excuse to drag me into court and probably bring Dylan down with me. They thought they had me cornered. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when someone expects your next move, you make a different one. I left the envelope untouched on the table and walked out. A month slipped by. I hadn't called a single Dunham client, no matter how many publishers kept blowing up my phone begging for help. I always answered politely, made excuses about professional obligations. I knew the non-compete agreement probably had holes, but I wasn't about to find out the hard way. Instead, I redirected my energy toward new ground. Small indie publishers. University presses. Literary agents needing a steady hand. Work that kept me sharp without triggering a legal nightmare. I thought I was off their radar for good until an invitation arrived that I never saw coming. Douglas Winters, the chairman of Dunham's board himself, wanted a private meeting. Not at the office either. Downtown. His club. That alone told me this wasn't business as usual. The Midwest Heritage Club was all polished mahogany and whispered conversations. In a private room, Douglas, with his silver hair and old money air, was already waiting, 2 glasses of scotch poured. Thanks for coming, Evan, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I'm sure you're wondering why I asked you here. You could say that, I replied, easing into the chair. He pushed a glass toward me and dove right in. Things at Dunham aren't going the way we hoped. I took a small sip, not saying a word. Revenue's down 38% this quarter, he admitted, voice low. Client retention? Worst it's ever been. The digital shift we bet on has completely backfired. That's unfortunate, I said evenly. Douglas studied me closely. You don't seem shocked. Publishing's always been about relationships, I said with a shrug. Always will be? He nodded, almost relieved I got it. Then leaned in. The board's losing faith in Samantha. What worked for her in tech isn't cutting it here. And you're telling me this because we want you back, he said, voice firm. As chief revenue officer. Higher than Samantha. I stared at him for a beat, letting that sink in. What about Dylan? I asked. Good man, Douglas said, but he doesn't have your relationships or your instincts. And Samantha? I asked, skeptical. Douglas's face hardened. She won't have a choice. And just like that, the pieces fell into place. This wasn't just about one bad quarter. This had been brewing for a long time. Douglas's shoulders sagged a little, the polished mask slipping. Samantha was Matthew's pick, his last big decision before his illness took over. We deferred to him out of respect. After Matthew passed, they gave her the reins and she stumbled. Hard. And firing me? I asked. Douglas's jaw tightened. The board didn't approve it. We found out after it happened, same with a lot of other moves. I leaned back, everything suddenly snapping into focus. Samantha hadn't been building something new. She'd been gutting the old guard, cleaning house of anyone who still carried Matthew's legacy. My firing had nothing to do with innovation. It was about loyalty. Douglas pressed on, trying to sweeten the deal. Double your old salary. Full control over sales and client relationships. Total backing to rebuild your team however you want. It was everything I'd fought for and lost. Vindication. Power. Security. Still, I didn't answer right away. I just met Douglas's eyes and said, I'll need some time to think about it. And deep down, I already knew the real game hadn't even started yet. Of course, Douglas had said, but don't take too long. Things are unraveling faster than we can manage. Driving home, I couldn't stop replaying our conversation in my head. It wasn't just that the board realized they'd made a mistake by letting me go. They had known it was a mistake from day one. They just didn't have the spine to stand up to it. And now, with profits tanking, suddenly it was urgent to bring me back. But there was something else, something Douglas hadn't spelled out, but I picked up loud and clear. They didn't want me just to fix the mess. They wanted me to be the cleanup crew. The guy who would tear down everything Samantha had built and eventually Samantha herself. It wasn't my expertise they were chasing. It was my book of clients and the loyalty those clients still had for me. Funny enough, realizing that didn't even make me angry. It made everything crystal clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I sent Douglas a short, polite email, thanks but no thanks. He fired back within minutes, sweetening the deal even more. I didn't bother to answer. Instead, I picked up my phone and made 3 calls that would change everything. First call, Andrew Cole. I'm ready to discuss that consulting offer, I told him. But I've got a different idea I want to run by you. I'm listening, he said. I don't want to consult exclusively for Coleman Press, I explained. Instead, I want to build something new. A collective. A group of independent publishers pooling resources, sharing distribution channels, and swapping market intel. No big contracts. No red tape. Just publishers helping publishers with me connecting the dots. There was a pause. Dead silence. How many others have you pitched this to? Andrew finally asked. None, I said. You're my first call. Because I was your biggest account? No, I corrected him. Because I trust your instincts. Andrew didn't even hesitate. I'm in. And I know at least 5 others who'll want in too. My second call was to Charlotte Miles at Meadowstone Press. Just like I expected, Charlotte was all in. She even upped the ante, suggesting we build a shared digital platform to give the little guys the same reach the big corporate houses had, without losing their independence. Third call? My attorney, Nathan. I laid out the whole plan. He listened carefully before answering. You're not violating your non-compete, he confirmed. You're not stealing clients, you're creating something brand new. It's a subtle difference, but legally it's enough. 2 weeks later, Carter Literary Alliance was alive. 7 founding members. Every single one either had already left Dunham or was planning to the minute their contracts ended. Each member chipped in to fund basic operations and pay me a modest salary. But the real power wasn't just in starting a competitor. It was in building something Dunham couldn't copy. A true collaboration where every publisher kept their freedom but gained the power of collective strength. No fancy titles. No corporate nonsense. I wasn't a CEO. I was just the guy who connected the right people at the right time. We rented a simple office out in Broad Ripple, well away from the downtown towers where Dunham and the other big players lived. I hired 2 people. A fresh college grad to handle our communications and social media, and an old-school publishing manager who had retired but still had plenty of fire left. Word spread fast. Within the first month, 3 more publishers had joined us. By the second month, we were bursting at the seams and had to find a bigger space. I made sure never to chase Dunham's clients directly. I didn't have to. They found us, drawn in by success stories and sick to death of the cold. Digital-only model Dunham kept forcing down their throats. One evening, near the end of September, Dylan called me. "They know what you're doing," he blurted out, no small talk. "Samantha's losing her mind. She's threatening legal action." I kept my voice calm. "We haven't broken any rules. Won't stop her from trying," he warned. "Board meetings tomorrow. It's gonna be brutal." "Not my circus anymore," I said. "I know," Dylan said quietly, "but I just thought you should hear it. And, I wanted to ask." He hesitated, then pushed through. "Is there room for one more in your new venture? I'm done here. I can't take it anymore." I couldn't help but smile. Everything was falling exactly into place. Not because I wanted revenge, because I understood the business better than they ever would. "Come by the office tomorrow," I told him. "Let's talk." The numbers didn't lie when the quarterly earnings call hit in November. Dunham's revenue had fallen off a cliff, down 40% from the same time last year. Their stock tanked 15% in a single day. I didn't even bother tuning in. I was deep in a strategy session with 13 consortium members, planning how we were going to dominate the next big publishing conference in Chicago. Andrew texted me the highlights, though. Samantha blaming everything on market disruptions and transition challenges, never mentioning the obvious, that their biggest clients had abandoned ship. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I picked up. "Is this Evan Carter?" a woman's voice asked. And right then, I had the distinct feeling the real storm was just beginning. "Speaking," I answered. "This is Meredith Shaw," the voice said crisply, every word clipped and formal. "I'm with the Dunham Board of Directors." Her tone told me everything I needed to know before she even got to the point. "We've decided to waive your non-compete agreement," she said. "Effective immediately." There was a pause, just long enough to sharpen the edge of what came next. "Our legal team has also been instructed to prepare a cease and desist letter regarding what we believe to be tortious interference with our client relationships." I let the silence stretch out, heavy and uncomfortable. "Do you have any response, Mr. Carter?" she asked stiffly. "Just one," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Have you actually sat down with your clients? Not through a survey, not through some middle manager. I mean a real conversation with Andrew Cole, with Charlotte Miles. Ask them why they walked away." "That's not relevant to," she started. "It's the only thing that matters." I cut her off, my voice firm. "They didn't leave because I built something new. They left because Dunham forgot what made them stay in the first place." There was a pause, longer this time. "The board is still in session," Meredith finally said, her voice thinner. "Perhaps you'd like to come in and present your perspective?" I smiled to myself. "I appreciate the invite," I said, "but I'm in the middle of a meeting of my own with 15 publishers who've already chosen their future." For a second, I thought the line had gone dead. Finally, she muttered, "I see," and hung up without another word. The cease and desist letter? It never showed up. 3 days later, the headline splashed across the business section of the Indianapolis Star. Dunham CEO steps down amid financial turbulence. 6 months after founding Carter Publishing Consortium, we moved into a permanent space, a renovated warehouse in the heart of Fountain Square. By then, we had 20 member publishers and a waiting list of others hoping to join. We weren't just a local story anymore. Small and mid-sized publishers from across the Midwest were coming on board, and the industry had definitely noticed. We got featured in Publishers Weekly, even made the New York Times business section. One article called it the relationship revolution in publishing. I hadn't set out to start a revolution. I just wanted to protect the parts of this business that still mattered, the human parts. Funny thing about old values. When people remember why they worked, they start to feel brand new again. One Tuesday morning, Douglas Winters called me out of the blue. Dunham had a new CEO now, someone who'd risen through the ranks instead of being brought in from some flashy outside firm. "We'd like to explore joining your consortium," Douglas said. No small talk, no build-up. I chuckled under my breath. "That's not how it works, Douglas," I told him gently. "We're not looking to bring in giants. Maybe a partnership arrangement, then?" He offered, pushing for anything. I'll bring it to the leadership council, I said, knowing full well what the answer would be. Our members hadn't joined to be swallowed back up by the very thing they escaped. They chose freedom and they weren't about to give it up. After the call, I wandered through our open plan office. No corner offices. No executive floors. Just desks. Just people. I liked it that way, being close enough to feel the heartbeat of the place I helped build. Dylan glanced up from his desk. Everything good? He asked. All good, I nodded. Dummum wants in? He guessed, grinning. Yeah, I said, shaking my head with a small laugh. Funny how things come full circle. Later that afternoon, I drove out to Eagle Creek Park. Found my old thinking spot by the water, the same place I used to sit when problems at Dummum felt too big to carry. But today, there were no heavy burdens. Just a quiet peace. The kind you only find after you fight for something real and win. I wasn't satisfied because we were successful. I was satisfied because we built something that mattered. Not because it was trendy. Not because it disrupted the industry. But because it was rooted in something timeless. People trusting people who had earned it. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is getting fired. Not because you get revenge, but because it forces you to build a life that's finally, truly your own.